The green crystal that grew for a century, disappearing radium and phantom lead. Down in a museum basement, a curator opened a wooden case and found a glass jar that didn't look sealed so much as possessed. Inside, a pale green crystal pressed against the walls, thicker than the inventory photo from decades earlier. A note in careful handwriting said the sample was radium salt small, dated 1915. The crystal hadn't been small for a long time. This is a different kind of danger. Not a splash, not a plume, but a slow chemistry fed by time, air, and radiation. Early radium salts, often radium chloride or radium bromide, weren't perfectly dry or pure. They sat with a little moisture and a little trapped gas. Radium decays, step by step, through a family of short-lived daughters until it lands on something stable: lead. In between, the chain spits out helium nuclei, alpha particles, that become helium gas. In a sealed container, that gas pushes, humidity condenses, and the salt slowly hydrates. The jar breathes in the dark, and the crystal grows. What nobody expected in those early collections was how radioactive decay turns bottles into laboratories. Radon, a noble gas in the decay chain, weeps out of crystals and coats the inside surface with daughters that plate onto glass. Polonium, bismuth, and lead isotopes that paint a faint, dangerous film. The object labeled radium becomes less radium over decades and more of its progeny. Conservators call it phantom lead because when they finally assay what's inside, much of the mass isn't what the label says anymore. Meanwhile, something else is happening to the glass itself. Alpha and beta particles slam into the silica network, knocking electrons into defects, darkening the surface. The glow that radium made famous, the eerie green of self-luminous paint, wasn't pure radiance. It was zinc sulfide phosphor stimulated by radiation. The crystal in the jar isn't glowing on its own. It's absorbing, cracking, pulling water, and sprouting like frost. The human stakes hide in that ordinary box. A researcher reaches for the lid with the same casual grip used on a jar of bolts. But a century-old radium sample doesn't forgive casual contact. The radon concentration inside can surge when disturbed. Open the jar and a breath draws in a gas you can't see. Dust lifts. It settles in lungs and on benches where hands live. The lock on this material isn't a door, it's a list. Double containment, modern sealed ampoules, continuous monitoring for radon, and a rule that says the oldest samples are the most treacherous. This was the moment everything changed for institutions that had inherited radium's past. Curators called radiation safety. Dosimeters blinked. The sample that arrived as a teaching aid became a disposal project. Specialists built glove box cradles, vented through filters that catch daughters, not just the gas. The jar went into a shielded sleeve. The air above it was sampled again and again until the numbers stopped rising. Only then did a technician cut the old seal and transfer the crystal to a modern vial, dried, purged, and laser welded shut. While that was happening in one archive, families in old houses found a different legacy. Antique clocks and aircraft gauges with radioluminescent dials sat on mantles and in attics. The paint, radium mixed with zinc sulfide, flaked into dust. Repairing a dial released particles that didn't care what year it was. Stories of the radium girls already taught one lesson about workplace exposure. The afterlife of the product taught another. Risk doesn't stop when the factory closes. There's a micro story from a university collection. A grad student cataloging minerals noticed 2 vials with the same accession number but different weights. One was labeled 192, the other 1975. The older vial was heavier, though nobody had added material. Decay had shifted mass into lead daughters, dense and stubborn. The student ran a gamma spectrum and saw lines that shouldn't be strong if it were fresh radium. The note in the database changed from display to restricted, and the vial moved to a cabinet that vents to the roof. The physics is straightforward, the behavior is not. Radium-226 decays with a half-life of 1,600 years. That's slow enough to feel like forever, and fast enough to make trouble. Helium buildup can rupture seals. Hydration can shatter stoppers. Radon can load a room if a careless twist releases it, and every daughter finds a home. On glass, in dust, on the shelf right next to a jar of something you don't want activated. In the aftermath of too many near misses, museums wrote new playbooks. Anything with radium gets surveyed and weighed. Containers are bagged inside bags. Desiccants are replaced on a schedule, if they're allowed at all. Custodians don't open, they call health physics. When disposal is the right route, the path is slow. Paperwork, licensed transport, and a future date when a drum leaves behind a space and a sigh of relief. The meaning hides in that first image, a crystal that looked alive. It wasn't life, it was time, humidity, and decay, turning a curiosity into a hazard. Locked away doesn't only mean armed guards and passcodes. Sometimes it means a ledger, a vent line, and an agreement that a jar stays closed, even when curiosity leans hard on the lid. Forbidden or fiction? Red Mercury, azidoazide, azide, and internet boogeyman. 3 names haunt late-night forums and tabloid headlines. Red Mercury, azidozide azide, and a rotating cast of world's most explosive novelties. They pull us in because they sound like our other villains. Unseeable, unstoppable, locked away by people who don't want you to know. But the lock here isn't a vault, it's a reality check. Start with Red Mercury. In the 1990s, it slithered through arms bazaars and rumor mills as a miracle bomb ingredient, an alleged scarlet goo that could trigger fusion in a pocket nuke, melt through armor, or make a suitcase warhead. Buyers paid fortunes for vials dyed with cinnabar or laced with mercury salts and red pigments. Sellers told stories about Soviet labs and secret isotopes. Get this, they even claimed it was used in anti-gravity devices because why not? The truth was simpler and meaner, a scam. There's no credible evidence red mercury exists as described. No peer-reviewed synthesis, no consistent composition, no demonstrated physics that would let a lump of mercury voodoo a thermonuclear reaction. What it did do was move money from the fearful to the cynical, and in the process, distract police and intelligence agencies with a ghost. Meanwhile, something else was happening in labs with real hazards. Chemists watching the red mercury circus were busy writing new glove charts because of dimethyl mercury, tightening Prion protocols, swapping out PFAS-laden foams, and treating chlorine trifluoride like a lit match in a fireworks store. When you've seen concrete burn, red mercury looks like a rumor trying very hard to be important. Then there's azidozide azide, the internet's favorite touch it and it detonates molecule. It's real as a structure, an azide-rich compound reported in small-scale synthetic work, bristling with nitrogen-nitrogen bonds under high internal strain. Yes, it's shock-sensitive. Yes, it's unstable. No, it's not a superweapon lurking in kitchen drawers. The myth says it explodes if you look at it wrong, if you type its name, if a thought vibrates nearby. The reality is that extreme nitrogen-caged explosives exist across a spectrum of sensitivity, and chemists who study them do so in microgram amounts with shields, remote handling, and chilling temperatures. The lesson is familiar. Proximity and quantity define risk. A teaspoon is science fiction. A speck is research with every precaution engaged. Labs publish crystal structures and decomposition data to learn how energy flows through bonds, not to hand out recipes. Here's where the boogeymen thrive. Our pattern-matching brain. We hear forbidden chemical and fill blanks with cinematic rules. But the real criteria we've seen, uncontrollable behavior, invisible persistence, resistance to safeguards, lethal dose and route, deceptive routine, don't care about headline flair. They care about mechanisms and systems. Red mercury fails those tests at line 1. Azidoazide. Azide clears unstable, but not societal scale danger because scale is the missing gear. What nobody pushing these myths mentions is how evidence behaves. With polonium-210, forensics uncovered alpha trails across hotel rooms. With PFAS, nationwide sampling pin numbers to taps and beer. With Prions, autoclave settings, and caustic baths sit in written policy. With chlorine trifluoride, accident reports and material compatibility charts read like survival manuals. Myths fade under that light. Real hazards sharpen. There's a micro story from a sting operation. An undercover officer met a seller who swore a red mercury vial could bring down a city. The vial was analyzed. It was mercury mixed with dye and a pinch of iodine. Chemically boring, theatrically ominous. The arrest record outlived the myth because paperwork beats rumor eventually. But here's the twist that matters. Fake monsters still cause real harm. Money that might have hardened water plants against PFAS instead chase red fairy tales. A student who hears only about internet explosives might underestimate a bottle of dimethyl mercury because it doesn't trend on TikTok. A facility manager might fear radiological assassins, but shrug at old radium samples in a storeroom. Attention is finite. Misdirection is a risk vector. So how do you separate forbidden from fiction? You ask boring questions. Where's the peer-reviewed data? What's the mechanism? What's the route of exposure? How is it regulated, and by whom? What containment materials work, and what documented failures exist? If the answers are rumors, conspiracies, or vibes, you're not looking at a locked vault. You're staring at a campfire story. In the end, the scariest materials don't need legends. They have paperwork, incident numbers, hospital protocols, treatment trains, and gloves heavy enough to make your hands tired. The boogeymen have none of that. They have a name that sounds dangerous and a seller who wants cash. We don't ban stories. We ban risk we can prove. Gray zone materials, smallpox stocks, GOF pathogens, and moratorium science. In a freezer behind 2 locked doors and an inventory that reads like a liturgy, a handful of vials hold a virus that once shaped the planet's fear, smallpox. Officially, it survives in 2 places, the CDC in Atlanta and Vector in Novosibirsk, under BSL-4 controls that treat air, water, and waste as potential vectors. Every opening of those freezers is a ceremony. Access logs, dual authorization, negative pressure, suits that hum with their own oxygen. The question that keeps returning isn't, can we? It's, should we still? The case for keeping it is blunt. If smallpox reappears by hidden stock, accident, or synthesis, live virus allows testing of diagnostics, antivirals, and next-generation vaccines under conditions that mimic the real threat. The case against is just as plain. Variola killed by the 100 million. We eradicated it at unbearable cost. The risk of a lab accident may be small, but the tail of the distribution is where history lives. When a fire code assumes concrete won't burn and learns otherwise, we rewrite the rules. With smallpox, we write them before. Meanwhile, something else was happening in the broader virology world. Gain-of-function research. Work that tweaks pathogens to probe transmission, host range, or immune escape. Collided with a public newly literate in risk. Influenza studies that adapted avian H5 strains to transmit between ferrets sparked a pause. Supporters argued that mapping the genetic routes to airborne spread could guide surveillance and vaccine design. Critics answered that creating a more transmissible strain moved danger from hypothetical to possible, and that safety systems, though careful, aren't perfect. Both sides agreed on one point. The stakes don't fit neatly on a whiteboard. This was the moment everything changed for how we talk about forbidden in biology. It's rarely a hard ban. It's a moving lock. Moratoria, funding pauses, layered approvals, independent review boards that ask whether a question must be answered with live agents or can be approached with models, pseudoviruses, or safer surrogates. The vocabulary turned bureaucratic on purpose. Precision is a safety feature. From inside a BSL-3 or BSL-4 suite, the work looks ordinary and grueling. A researcher checks a suit's positive pressure, steps through chemical showers, logs a reagent lot number with the care of someone tracking micrograms of polonium. Every screw on a cabinet is accounted for. Alarms are tested before pipettes are calibrated. Waste is autoclaved twice. The ritual matters because fatigue is real and boredom is a hazard. The lock here is human engineering as much as hardware. What nobody knew at the start of some high-profile projects was how the public would inhabit the risk alongside the science. News cycles compress nuance. Gain of function became a stand-in for anything scary. Researchers learned to narrate their own safeguards, to explain why a particular mutation panel was chosen, what endpoint justified the work, and how an institutional biosafety committee weighed alternatives. The conversation extended to dual-use concerns, findings that enable both defense and harm, pulling journals and funders into gatekeeping roles they never wanted. While that was happening in policy rooms, the technical options multiplied. Reverse genetics allows building influenza from cDNA under tight controls. Pseudotype viruses let teams study entry without replicating the full pathogen. Synthetic biology can assemble genomes, but that same power builds safer chassis for testing, out at the edge of what counts as live. CRISPR makes edits precise. It also makes reviews sharper because intent is traceable base by base. The gray zone didn't vanish, it grew more detailed. There's a micro story from a committee meeting. A young PI presented a plan to examine how a set of spike protein changes affected receptor binding in human airway cells. The room listened, then asked a quiet question. Could you answer this with non-replicating systems? He paused, recalculated, and redrew the project on his feet. Split the work, use pseudoviruses for binding and entry, reserve only a narrow, justified set of live virus assays under higher containment. The study proceeded. The lock held, and the question still got answered. In the smallpox debate, resolutions keep arriving and expiring. Destroy the last stocks and declare an era closed. Keep them and accept a standing risk in exchange for preparedness. Buffers appeared. Sequence data preserved. Vaccine libraries expanded. Emergency manufacturing lines practiced. The compromise looks like engineering everywhere else in this story. Redundancy, transparency, and a bias toward the safest method that still yields the necessary signal. The lesson that binds these gray zones to everything we've seen is simple. Forbidden isn't a fixed list. It's a posture. We lock up what we can't control. We constrain what we must touch. We retire what time proves unnecessary. And when a choice sits on a line that wavers with new tools and new threats, we slow down, widen the circle of reviewers, and make the lab as unforgiving of shortcuts as the materials themselves. Exotic instability, chlorine trifluoride, and energetic oxidizers. The floor fire started where floors don't burn. A wafer fab's maintenance tech watched a pale green hiss curl from a fitting and felt the wrongness before the alarms caught up. Training said don't spray water. Training said back away, isolate, and let the chemistry spend itself. Chlorine trifluoride doesn't wait for sparks, it brings its own. Here's the shape of the threat. ClF3 is a stronger oxidizer than oxygen. It reacts with almost anything that's even slightly willing to give up electrons. Organics, metals, carbonized residue, even materials we call inert in every other context. Asbestos, sand, concrete. If there's moisture, it hydrolyzes to hydrogen fluoride and hydrogen chloride. That's not just corrosive fog. That's acid that eats glass, pits lung tissue, and turns clean metal dull in minutes. The phrase safety officers use sounds like folklore until you've seen it. It oxidizes the ashes of the ashes. What nobody outside those rooms sees is the engineering built around a single rule: keep it dry. Cylinders are nickel, Monel, or carefully chosen stainless steels that form a protective fluoride film on contact. Lines are baked out and vacuum dried before service. Every gasket is vetted, every weld is purged. The cabinets that hold cylinders are negative pressure boxes with scrubbers that don't rely on water. Leak detection runs continuously. The people who sign off on these systems assume failure like gravity. Meanwhile, something else is happening that makes ClF3 more than a legend. It's useful. In semiconductor plants, it cleans CVD chambers by fluorinating silicon and metal residues without plasma, cutting downtime and power use. In nuclear fuel processing, it helps convert uranium compounds to UF6. Several hundred tons are produced annually, which tells you this isn't a lab curiosity. It's a tool, wielded under rules that border on ritual. This was the moment everything changed for crews that treated oxidizer as a tame word. A 2006 incident in Hsinchu, Taiwan, turned a release into chemical burns and corrosion that crawled beyond the initial room. Elsewhere, valve mishaps spun into cleanup nightmares. Scorched concrete, pitted steel, glass fogged, not by vapor but by chemistry. The lesson wasn't never use it, it was respected as if it's already reacting. Firefighting doctrine flips on its head here. Water is a propellant for disaster, feeding hydrolysis and heat. Standard extinguishers don't help. The plan is isolation. Shut valves if you can do it remotely, starve the feed, and let remaining gas or liquid react in a controlled space. Specialized dry agents may be used in specific scenarios, but often the safest approach is to isolate and monitor until the hiss stops and readings fall quiet. Then comes the long tail. Neutralize residues without triggering fresh reactions, survey for HF, and replace anything the gas kissed. Containment is a study in material science. Nickel and Monel handle ClF3 because they develop a passivating fluoride layer that slows further attack. Certain stainless steels survive under dry, clean conditions. Copper can work. Aluminum is a trap. Its fluorides can be protective, but moisture and heat swing outcomes fast. Molybdenum, tungsten, titanium, they form volatile fluorides and vanish under the wrong conditions. Even glass and ceramics, normally everyone's friend, can join the reaction if silicon is accessible and moisture is around. That's why systems are metal all the way until the chemistry ends. From the worker's perspective, the lock is physical and cultural. You wear supplied air respirators and full chemical suits for line work. You treat every fitting like a suspect. You read permits that detail purge sequences down to seconds.
You run inert gas sweeps that leave no doubt. And if an instrument hints at moisture, you stop. The price of impatience is a cloud you can't outwalk. While that was happening on a fab floor, regulators and industry codified the boundaries. Facilities need licensing that treats CLF3 like a caged animal. Segregated storage, remote valve actuation, blast panels, emergency response plans that don't improvise. IDLH classification sets the tone. Training drills teach do less sooner. Hit the isolation. Warn the neighbor bay, step back. There's a
Micro story in a micro leak. A technician notices a faint discoloration on a compression fitting. The sniffer pings above baseline. He doesn't reach for a wrench. He calls. The line is purged with nitrogen, evacuated, isolated, and the fitting replaced in a dry box. The whole process takes a day and costs thousands. It also prevents a minute that could have cost a hospital stay and a shutdown. The irony is blunt. The same property that makes chlorine trifluoride a menace, the eagerness to react, makes it an unmatched cleaner. It saves megawatts by removing plasma steps. It lowers greenhouse gas emissions compared to older perfluorocarbons. It's a net safety win in that context because you bring less energy to the chamber, but only if every other control is perfect. In the aftermath of incidents, companies publish compatibility tables and case studies that read like cautionary tales. Do not use water. Do not assume inert. Do not forget HF will be there after, hiding in condensate and on surfaces. The story repeats across sites and years. Careful wins, shortcuts punish, dry is king. Locked away doesn't mean unused. It means contained by design, by habit, by fear earned the honest way, through burns and pits and floors that taught grown engineers to doubt concrete. Brittle giants, monocrystalline silicon wafers, and the knife edge of scale. The first time you hold a 300mm silicon wafer, it doesn't feel like the heart of a trillion-dollar industry. It feels like a dinner plate made of moonlight, thin, cool, impossibly smooth. Then someone tells you it can shatter if you look at it wrong, and you start breathing shallower. The paradox is right there in your hands. The most perfectly ordered solid we can mass produce is also one of the most unforgiving. To get one, you start with sand's quiet cousin, ultra-pure silicon. You melt it in a crucible and draw a single crystal from the liquid using a seed, Shawkrowski growth. Turning the boule slowly, so atoms stack in lockstep, no grain boundaries to scatter electrons. Perfection is the point. Defects mean dead transistors. But that same perfection is why it breaks the way it does. In a crystal, this flawless, a scratch is a roadmap for a crack. Stress doesn't wander, it sprints. What nobody outside the fab sees is how many traps live between the furnace and the clean room. After the boule cools, diamond wire saws slice it into wafers thinner than a coin. Each slice meets polish that takes nanometers at a time, flattening until the total bow across a foot-wide disc is less than a hair's width. Flat enough that light treats it like a mirror. Flat enough that lithography can print features measured in dozens of atoms. The tolerance stack is brutal. Introduce a micro scratch, a subsurface fracture, a whisper of residual stress, and the wafer remembers. Meanwhile, something else is happening at scale. The industry pushed from 200mm to 300mm wafers because area buys you economics. More chips per pass, better throughput. Now, 450mm sits like a dare on old roadmaps. The physics push back. Larger diameters amplify every defect and every vibration. A tiny force at the edge becomes a lever on the whole disk. Handlers changed. Robots learned gentler paths. End effector pads went from simple suction to compliant, distributed contact, engineered to never imprint a bruise. There's a micro story from a lithography bay. A tech watched a wafer slip 0.5 millimeter in a cassette, enough tilt to clip a guide. The sound was a brittle sigh, then a cascade. 9 wafers spiderwebbed at once. That's not just glass breaking. That's weeks of furnace time, thousands of dollars in silicon, and a line of tools that stop because fragments in a clean room are shrapnel. The cleanup isn't a broom, it's a lockdown. Isolate, vacuum with filtered lines, wipe until particle counters fall quiet, recalibrate every station that touched that batch. This was the moment everything changed for how fabs treat motion. Conveyor speed slowed, acceleration profiles softened. Software learned to predict resonance in the frames that carry cassettes.